everyone, welcome to this video on Alteryx hands-on questions. If you like the video, do subscribe to my channel. Now, let's get started with the introduction. We will be using the accident data set here. If you are following the series, you would know we are using the accident data set from Kaggle. But since it's taking a lot of time to process, I have just created a text input for this example. So it will have the date and you will have the accident numbers. Now, let's move on to our questions. We will be accepting user inputs, which will be week to date, month to date, and year to date. Based on the input which user has provided, we will show the accidents. Example, if user has selected week to date, then we will display the WTD accidents. Note the calculation of WTD, MTD, and YTD will be with respect to the current date. So let's move on to Alteryx. First, let's use our input tool to get the data. Before that, let me just try in our container to make it more appealing. So you can bring in the tool container from the documentation window. We'll bring in the input tool. I already have created the sample table, so let me bring the table from there. For you to create this, you will just have to use this text input. You will have to enter the headers which you want, which will be date and accident, and then you can enter the rows one by one. So our input is done. Next, we'll have to create the YTDs, MTDs and all right. For that, we'll use a formula tool. Let's bring in our documentation to just create for the processing part. So this is the container for processing. Let me bring in the formula tool. So I'll just copy it from the previous one so that we'll save some time in this. We'll connect the input with this formula tool. So for year to date, we'll use the if-else statements. Conditions are if the date which is being passed from our text input is less than equal to the date and time today. This will be handy if we have future or forecasted dates in our input. Otherwise, it can be ignored. This is under condition with an and, that is, if the date time format, which is the date in our sample, will extract the year part of it and will match it with the date time today. The date time today will give our current date and match the year part from there. So if this matches, then it will be a year to date. Otherwise, for other rows, it will be others. Let me just show you how this value will look like. If you see, this is 2023 Jan, right? So the YTD column shows YTD. Again, this is also Jan, this also shows YTD. This is 2022, so it shows others. And last is again Jan, so it shows YTD. For YTD, we'll have to add these three columns value of accidents. Okay, that's the logic. Moving on, let's move on to our next one, which would be MTD. So MTD will follow the similar logic where instead of year, we'll compare the month first and then the year as well. Year is important because if we compare only the months, we have data from 2022 as well, so that will also be taken into account. Let me show you the formula for MTD. So these are the new columns which I'm creating. Here I'll keep it same whether the date which we are providing as user input should be less than equal to the today's date, and the date time format will pass in capital B, which is for month, should be equal to the date time today's month. Along with this, we'll have to check the year part as well. So I have just copied the year logic from here, that the year which is passed from our user input should be same to the year of today's date. Then it is MTD as others. Let me show you how this would look like. If if you see for the month of Jan, right? So this is an MTD. This is also month of Jan, so it is MTD. This is 2022, which is not. This is 22, so others. Again, this is month of Jan, so it is the MTD. Moving on, we'll go to our WTD calculation. For WTD calculation, what we are trying to do that from today's date, we will minus or take the date difference with the date given in our data set. And if it is less than 7, then it is a WTD, else it will be others. We want to see the output of this. If we see this week, right, today minus 7, so 25th will come in that, and it will be added as a week to date. All the other days will be in the other category. So let's see, 12th is not this week. This is also others. So 25th comes as a WTD, and everything else in our data set others. Okay, so there's only one week to date value for us. So this part is done. We are getting our three columns, which is year to date, month to date, and week to date. Next thing to keep in mind is we don't want the others, right? We just want for YTD, we want only the YTD rows to be calculated. For MTD, the MTD three values, and for WTD, only this row to be calculated and give us the sum of accident as 6. For that, we'll use the filter tool to filter out respectively the WTD, MTD, and YTD. So let me bring in a filter tool. Let me just copy from our previous one to save some time for us. As you have seen, the previous video went very lengthy. So we have three filters from this formula. In the first one, we'll whatever value is in YTD column, right? We'll take only the YTD part of it. So we'll take only these two and this last one. We'll ignore the others. Same for MTD. We'll take in the MTD column and match it with the MTD values. And finally is our WTD. So we are able to extract the respective values for all these three columns. Next would be to create our macro. For that purpose, let's try to create a macro. If you have watched the series, you will be having a better understanding of how macro works now, okay? So we'll have to go to the interface tool and get the macro input first. Let me bring in our documentation and let me rename it as macro input. From our interface, I'll bring in the input, this one. We'll edit the data. We'll have to provide a sample data to it. So we are going to pass the month to date, year to date, right? So let's keep this title as type. Let me pass a sample value called as MTD to it. Next part will be our filter part, right? Along with our, if we are using drop down, we can use that purpose. So let's try a second thing, which would be processing part, okay? We'll enable all the processing here. As I mentioned it before, right, for macro, first try to get how one column is going to iterate and work, right? So example, we have taken MTDs. Now we'll have to filter out our input which is coming and take out only the MTDs. So let's bring in our filter. Connect this to the input. The custom input will keep the type is equal to MTD. So we are going to filter out the MTD value from here. Next, we'll have to iterate this, right? So for that purpose, let's bring in a drop down to give the user the option to select whatever they want. So bring in a drop down here. remove the connection which got created. So in a drop-down, let me use manually selected values, which could be WTD, MTD, followed by YTD. Okay, out of these three, user can select anything. Next thing you know, to iterate this, we will have to connect a drop-down so that we get the update values, right? So let's connect this queue to this lightning symbol. We got our update, and this update will update the a specific string which will be the MTD value. So we are going to get three, right? MTD, WTD, and YTD. So one by one, these values will get replaced. This is the use of this update. And finally, we'll have a macro output. So let's create an output container. And whatever value we are getting from this, right, we'll pass it to output. Okay, so let me bring in output. Macro output is here. Let me connect this to this. As we know, it's important for us to save the macro so that it will be used in our previous or next one. Okay, let's try to save this. We'll return back to our workflow which we were creating, or we'll insert our macro from in it. This will be our macro insert. Let's right click, insert macro. This one is which we created. So here in the drop down, we are able to see the three values. Next, we'll have to pass an input to this macro, right? We have an issue here. If we see the fields here, MTD, WTD are columns. They are not a value in the same column, right? These are separate columns. So we cannot pass in this value to this because if we try to pass in, we'll have to select only one input. So either we can select YTD, MTD, or WTD, which will not serve our purpose. So for this purpose, we will just create a text input with all the three measures which we are going to have it. Okay, let me copy this and show you. This is again a similar input tool, text tool, where I'm entering WTD, MTD, and YTD values for the user input. Let me connect this to our macro, and let me choose this dim string as the value which is we are passing to this. Let me try to browse this and run it. So you see WTD was selected, so our macro is giving an output of WTD. Next, let's set MTD and try to run it. So we are getting the MTD output out of this macro. So our user input part is 6. Now we need to connect this WTD, MTD which we are getting to this calculation. So based on this input, the calculation should happen. Okay, I don't want all the three calculations to happen. For that, we will have to bring in, join this input, okay, with our formula tool to get one by one. Okay, we can't get it all together. So let me bring in our documentation so that we'll show the joins here. Join in the sense we have the measures here, we have our input here. Okay, we need to join those two, but we cannot normally join these two input with this because the joining, there is no joining condition, right? Here we are getting a type, but here we don't have any type. Okay, because MTD and YTD in our formula is coming from three different columns. If we would have kept this in an MTD, YTD, and W in the same column using some if switch statements and all, which would be a little bit lengthy to do it. So that's why I haven't done that. In that case, we could have just join these two based on a type. But here, since we don't have that joining condition, we will be using the joins to connect this macro input with the type which we have created. Okay, because if you see, this one is now returning as the values, right, which is WDD column. Let me bring in a join. So this is our first join. For YTD, let's connect this YTD, which we are getting true values, to the left anchor and this macro input to this. For joining condition, so now we have the YTD column from our left and from right we have our type, right? So this is anyways returning is as the YTD is because we have done a filter. Let's make this as YTD. In the annotation you can mention YTD to make it more clear. Next we'll have to do this join for the other two as well. Second will be from true value, we'll use the MTD, bring in this, and same our join condition here we'll keep it MTD and here type. Let me change this annotation to avoid confusion. This will be MTD. And finally our WTD. Let me join this one and have to join this with this. This will be our WTD. Now if we try to run and browse this, okay, then I'll have to use a browse tool. This is YTD. Let's select YTD here, okay. So we'll be getting the YTD three columns out of it. But for MTD and WTD, it will return as blank because the user hasn't selected those inputs, right? Let me show that. So if you see this is coming as blank, same will happen for WTD. So if I change this user input now to MTD and try to run it, now MTD will give us the value, YTD and WTD will be null, okay? So this is what we are expecting. Final thing would be to do it for the accident, right? Based on the user input, we have to summarize the accident and so. For that purpose, let's bring in our output, create a container for output. First of all, we can't keep one value, right? This is our issue since the beginning. It's not in a single column, so we will have to union all these three values together. Let me bring in union and let's join all these outputs from this join. Okay, make sure you're attaching the J to it, not the other things. If I show you the output now, now you see MTD value it was giving, right? Other two values were not giving. So if you try to use a join, you won't be able to do it because see now these first and third they are returning nulls, right? So if you try to join them again using two more joins, this will not work. For that reason I have used a union because only one part is giving an answer at one time. Next would be a final step which would be to bring in our summarize here, and let's summarize based on of the type. Group by the type and let's calculate the sum of accidents here, and let me bring in a browse for our output. So MTD accident is 9. Let us cross verify this. So this is for month of Jan, so 1, this is 2, so 3 accidents, and finally we have 6, which is 9 accidents. Same value we will get for YTD because YTD and for MTD for Jan will be same, right? Let us check our WTD value for now. For WTD we should be getting 6 because this is only the WTD week. Let's go to a macro input. Let's change it to WTD now and try to run it. Let's go to this. Okay, I think there is some issue here. Join. This is giving us WTD. Let me browse this. WTT is being passed from here. Did I use the wrong connection? I think I would have, yeah, so that's what I should have made it WTD, right? That's why this issue is happening. You see the three joins. After bringing all the three joins, I need to change this. Okay, this is MTD with the type, this is YTD with the type, and finally is WTD. That's why this was not coming. So I have rejoined it correctly. And so we get the WTD, which is the number of cylinders is 6. Thank you for watching.